Hey guys, welcome to another episode of the Vinyl Den, your channel for record collecting by record collectors. I'm Nick. Today I'm asking you if music format even matters. There's a bunch of links down below. You got links for the Vinyl Den Facebook group, for the merch page, for the Spotify and Apple Music playlist that I put together every week, and the Patreon page. So make sure you check all that out. Like always, if you enjoyed the episode, make sure you give me a thumbs up. Hit that subscribe button down below. Make sure you hit that notification bell so you're notified every time I release new episodes. So streaming and digital music have been the dominant format for going on about 20 years now. But over the last several years, CDs, vinyl records have been making big inroads into streaming's market share. But does the format of your music even really matter? I think at the basic level, I'd say no, but I think there are big pros and cons to each different format. Me personally, I love vinyl records. It's my preferred format. CDs are just a notch below that. And then streaming, especially depends on the streaming service you use. Some of them are really good. Some of them offer almost CD quality. And then other ones just sound absolutely terrible. So just like pretty much everything else music related, this is all very subjective. Everyone is going to have a different opinion on this because each format does offer a different kind of listening experience. When you're just streaming music, yes, you're just picking up your phone, clicking on a song. But when you listen to CD and vinyl records, there's a physical element to the music. It's more of a process. It's more of I call it an intentional listening experience, which I'm always going to prefer over a streaming model. I guess the central question around music format is what's most important to you? Is it the experience? Is it the emotional connection to what you grew up with? Is it about overall music quality? Is it about convenience? That's what I said. Each individual person is going to have a different answer to this question. And the one thing a lot of people always throw back, especially when you're talking about CDs and vinyl records, is that nostalgia factor. But there are younger generations that didn't really grow up with CDs or vinyl records that have been getting into them more over the last several years. Because a lot of them grew up streaming their music, and it's a completely different idea to actually hold a physical copy of that album in your hands. Because like I said, there's pros and cons to every format. I prefer vinyl records. Vinyl records to me have a more warm, more almost lifelike kind of sound to them. The vinyl record listening experience is also about having that larger artwork, being able to sit down and actually read the liner notes, who's involved with the pressing of the album, the mastering, the production work on there, and having that record in your hand creates more of an immersive experience. And also the vinyl revival that's been going on since 2008 has created this really fun culture around vinyl records. Sometimes it's about more than just the music, especially when it comes to record store day. Sitting out in front of the record store, talking about music all night long is something that adds to the overall experience of vinyl records. But there's also some big cons when it comes to records. They're big, they're not portable, they're not convenient to listen to. Having a quality turntable is not cheap. A lot of times you're going to spend, $400, $500, $600 plus on a high quality turntable. It's true that records degrade over time, they warp, they break easy. If you're someone that's just a casual music listener, it's probably not a great format for you. But it's a format I grew up with and I absolutely love until this day. I listened to records up until, I didn't buy my first CD until probably 97 or 98. At that time I was still listening to records and cassettes. So I didn't even get into CDs until almost the end of the decade. And probably the biggest con when it comes to vinyl records is the cost of the records. Over the last, I'd say 8 to 9 years, you've really seen a huge jump in the cost of records. I remember 2018, 2019, I was spending between, I'd say $20 to $26 to $27 for most new records. Nowadays, most new records you're going to pay $35 to $40 for. So that's a steep increase in a relatively short period of time. I think a lot of the pros of CDs actually make up for some of the cons of records, especially when it comes to convenience, portability. They're much more durable. They're a lot cheaper to find on the secondary market. A big pro for me when it comes to CDs is the fact that they do not degrade over time. You can have a CD now and listen to that CD nonstop for the next 5 years, and it's going to sound exactly the same in 5 years as it does now. There's also a better dynamic range on CDs. If it's mastered correctly, sometimes you can get CDs to sound even better than you can a record. Another great thing about CDs is a lot of times you get bonus content on them if you get like a Japanese import, there's typically a bonus song or an extra couple of songs on a lot of those releases that aren't on those same releases here in the US. But there's still some big drawbacks to CDs. I think the biggest one is probably the fact that a lot of new cars just don't have CD players in them. So you take one of those big positive factors, which is the portability and convenience of it, and you can take that right out of the equation if you don't have something to listen to it on. Another big drawback for CDs, especially ones manufactured between the late 90s and early 2010s, is the fact that increasingly year by year, they were being mastered to sound louder and louder, oftentimes at the expense of overall quality. And to accomplish this, they were compressing the dynamic range on these albums. So dynamic range is the difference between the loudest and the quietest parts on the album. So doing this made everything more in your face, made everything more louder, and over time could really fatigue the ears. So really sacrificing that fidelity and that nuance on the album just for the sake of being more loud. It's also something we hear a lot with streaming, but when it comes to vinyl records, you got a lower dynamic range on there, so the loudness wars didn't really have that big effect on records. But most people stream their music, and that's not something that's going to change anytime soon. It offers the ultimate convenience. You literally have millions of songs right at your fingertips. It's the most portable format of music. It works across all devices. You know, a lot of streaming services have these tailored playlists that are tailored specifically to your style of music. And the algorithm not only puts those playlists together, but it also can go out there and find new music that it thinks you'll like. And even with paying that monthly subscription, a lot of times it's still cheaper than buying an actual physical copy of those albums. But the biggest con to me when it comes to streaming is the fact that you just don't own your music. You're renting it. And on those lower price tiers or ad-supported tiers, a lot of that music is highly compressed. And it's something that a lot of people that just stream their music often don't recognize until they actually take and stream an album on Spotify and then put a CD on the exact same album and hear a huge difference between the two. Something you do have with CD and records is the actual album art. And granted, with CDs, it's the much smaller album art and liner notes. That's something you really don't get when you stream music. When you stream music, you're also at the whim of whatever album or whatever version of that album streaming services have on their service. So in a lot of instances, they don't always have maybe the best sounding mastering of that album. And when you look at the big picture of music, when you stream an album, when you stream a song, the artist is earning much less money for that stream than they ever would if you just bought the CD or bought the album. And yes, cassettes are still out there, and there are some people that have started collecting more of them over the last couple of years, but I think cassettes will always stay that very small niche, you know, especially comparing that to CD sales, vinyl record sales. It's always going to be a fraction of what those are. So getting back to my question at the beginning of the episode, does music format even matter? I think it really depends on the listener's priorities, whether it's convenience, overall sound quality, an emotional connection to the music, or if they like just collecting the physical albums. And to be completely honest, I think a majority of people out there probably don't even care about the sound quality difference between streaming or CDs or vinyl records. It's more about just having that song to listen to. And I think there are very few people out there that stick to just one format. I mean, I listen to records when I'm at home. I stream also when I'm at home also. I think it's a split. I'd say probably 60-40. I listen to more records than I do streaming at home. And when I'm in my car, when I'm driving around, if I'm going on a long trip, I'll bring CDs to listen to. If I'm just going around town, making a 10 or 15 minute drive down the road, I'll just stream something. And I think that's how a lot of people are if you do listen to a physical format of music. You know, it's just kind of a hodgepodge of all different formats. But for the casual music fan, I don't think people really care. And that's why streaming has been this huge dominant force and will continue to be that dominant force for decades to come. But if you're a music lover, if you're an audiophile, format could make a big difference. But it's been kind of interesting to watch younger generations over the last several years get more and more into physical formats of albums, especially when it comes to CDs. Every time I'm at the record store, I see more and more younger people in the CD section, even though they didn't necessarily grow up with that format, whether it's CDs or records. Yes, they might have grew up with those formats in their house, but you know, streaming and digital music have been the dominant force for 15 years now. It's been interesting to watch them discover those formats, and it's really going to be the young people that continue to carry on these formats into the future. Because a lot of us in our 30s and 40s and older, you know, we've got a lot of the music that we want on CD, on record, and the growth in music sales for the next couple of decades is going to be that younger generation. But ultimately, when it comes down to it, I say music format to a majority of people doesn't matter. I think a lot of that has to do with convenience, because you've got every song at your fingertips. You don't actually have to go out and buy a CD player or a record player and spend, $30, $40, $50 on a record when you can just pick up your phone and just click on a song. So the cost versus value aspect to CDs and records, I think, will always be a hindrance compared to streaming. And the format doesn't define the music, but it shapes the listening experience. A great song is still a great song regardless of the format you listen to it on. And format more so changes the experience of sitting down and listening to it. The process of putting a record on or putting a CD on. It doesn't change the quality of the song, but it just has a whole different emotion tied to it. And when you listen to a CD or you listen to a record, there's an intent with that listening experience. And when you just stream an album or stream songs or stream a playlist, a lot of the times it just becomes background music. Well, that's all I got for you today, guys. Thanks for checking the show out. Make sure you drop me a comment down below. Let me know what you guys think of this. When it comes to music format, that's always a really big conversation. But let me know if you think music format really matters all that much. But at the end of the day, I think whatever format someone prefers has more to do with the experience they want out of the album. Their own personal preference, their own connection to those albums or those songs. A music format doesn't really matter until it does. And then you turn into a lot of us that have, thousands and thousands of records and CDs, and it turns into a completely different experience. But let me know what you guys think. Like always, if you enjoyed the episode, make sure you give me a little thumbs up. Hit the subscribe button down below. That's all I got. Until next time, keep on spinning. Peace.